Assalamu alaikum. So this is Moidin Ahmed Sharif. My dear class 11 students. Today we are going to see BIO-ZOOLOGY in that chapter 10 neural control and coordination. So last week we saw about the structure of neurons, the nerve cell and about the brain. So in this class we will start from the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is a long, slender, cylindrical nervous tissue. It is protected by the vertebral column and surrounded by the three membranes of brain. The spinal cord that extends from the brainstem into the vertebral canal of the vertebral column up to the level of 1 or second lumbar vertebra. So the nerve roots of the remaining nerves are greatly elongated to exit the vertebral column at their appropriate space. So next we will see about the reflex action and the reflex arc. So when dust falls in our eyes, the eyelids close immediately, not waiting for our willingness. On touching a hot pan, the hand is withdrawn rapidly. Do you know how this happens? The spinal cord remains as a connecting functional nervous structure in between the brain and the effector organs. But sometimes, when a quick response is needed, the spinal cord can affect motor initiation as the brain brings about an effect. This rapid action by spinal cord is called reflex action, and it is fast, involuntary, unplanned sequence of actions that occurs in response to a particular stimulus. The nervous elements involved in carrying out this reflex action constitute a reflex arc, or in other words, the pathway followed by a nerve impulse to produce a reflex action is called a reflex arc. So the functional components of a reflex arc are: first one is the sensory receptor. It is a sensory structure that responds to a particular stimulus. Second one is the sensory neuron. This neuron takes the sensory impulse to the gray matter of the spinal cord through the dorsal root of the spinal cord. Next one is interneurons. One or two interneurons may serve to transmit the impulses from the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. Fourth one is the motor neuron. It transmits impulses from the central nervous system to the effector organs. Effector organ, it may be a muscle or gland which responds to the impulse received. So there are two types of reflexes. They are unconditional reflexes and a conditional reflexes. So in that you can see in the diagram, in the reflex arc, when a heat or pain is received by the receptors of the skin, the sensory neuron and the motor neuron along with the interneuron takes the signal through the spinal cord to the brain, which causes two types of reflex, unconditional and conditional reflex. First we will see what is an unconditional reflex. So the unconditional reflex is an inborn reflex for an unconditioned stimulus. It does not need any past experience, knowledge or training to occur. Example, blinking of an eye when dust particles about to fall into it. Sneezing and coughing due to foreign particle entering the nose or the larynx. So these are the unconditioned reflex which is inborn to us, so which happens in a matter of seconds. Next one is the unconditioned reflex. So unconditioned reflex is a response. Next one is the unconditioned reflex. So unconditioned reflex is a response to a stimulus that has been occurred by learning. This does not actually naturally exist in animals. Only an experience makes it a part of the behavior. Example, excitement of salivary gland on seeing and smelling a food. The conditioned reflex was first demonstrated by the Russian physiologist Pavlov in his classical conditioning experiment in a dog. The cerebral cortex controls the conditioned reflex. Now we will see the functions of the cranial nerves. There are actually 12 cranial nerves: olfactory nerves, optic nerves, oculomotor nerves, cochlear nerves, trigeminal nerve, Addison's nerve, facial nerve, auditory and vestibulocochlear nerve, glossopharyngeal nerve, vagus, spinal accessory and hypoglossal. So these are the nature of them are either sensory or motor. So every nerve is a response for functions like sense of smell, sense of sight, functioning of facial parts, rotation of the eyeball, taste and touch, speech and swallowing. So they have a multiple functions in our body. So next we will see about the two types of nervous system. They are the peripheral nervous system and the somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. So in the diagram you can see what is the autonomous nervous system. These of two types, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So in parasympathetic nervous system, eyes, salivary glands, heart, lungs, stomach, liver, intestine and bladder are there, and it has several functions. For example, as eyes constrict pupil, heartbeat, it slows the heartbeat, stomach stimulus digestion. So like that, parasympathetic nerves controls these functions, whereas the sympathetic nerves controls the functions like eyes, dilating it, accelerating the heartbeat, dilating the bronchi, it inhibits digestion, stimulus glucose release. Then in intestine, it inhibits peristalsis and secretion. In bladder, it relaxes the bladder. So these are the sympathetic functions. So now we will see about the difference between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So SNS originates in the thoracic and lumbar region of the spinal cord, whereas the PNS, that means the parasympathetic nervous neural system, it originates in the cranial region of the brain and the sacral region of the spinal cord. Sympathetic ganglia are linked up to form a chain. Parasympathetic neural system, ganglia remains isolated. Ganglionic fibers are short and the postganglionic fibers are long in the SNS, whereas in PNS, preganglionic fibers are long and the postganglionic fibers are short. So these are some of the differences of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Next we will see about the sensory reception and processing. Our senses makes us aware of changes that occur in our surroundings and also within our body. Sensation is the awareness of the stimulus and perception is the interpretation of the meaning of the stimulus occur in the brain. So the receptors are classified based on their location as exteroreceptors are located at or near the surface of the body. These are sensitive to external stimulus and receive nerve sensory inputs for hearing, vision, touch and taste and smell. In interoreceptors are located in the visceral organs and blood vessels. They are sensitive to internal stimuli. Proprioceptors are also kind of interoreceptors. They provide information about position and movements of the body. Now we will see about the first receptor, photoreceptor called as the eye. Eye is the organ of vision. Located in the orbit of the skull and held in its position with the help of 6 eccentric muscles. These muscles aid in the movement of the eyes and they receive the nerve innervation from the cranial nerves. The eyelashes and the eyebrows helps to protect the eyeball from foreign objects. Perspiration and also it saves the eye from the direct rays of the sunlight. Sebaceous glands at the base of the eyelashes are called ciliary glands, which secrete a lubricating fluid into the hair follicles. The lacrimal glands located in the upper and lateral region of each orbit, it secretes the tears. Tears are secreted at a rate of 1 ml per day and it contains salt, mucus and isoenzyme to destroy the bacteria. The eye has two components, the anterior and posterior components. The anterior components has two chambers. The first one lies between the cornea and iris and the second one lies between the iris and the lens. These two chambers are filled with watery fluid called as the aqueous humor. The posterior compartment lies between the lens and the retina and it is filled with a jelly-like fluid called vitreous humor that helps to retain the spherical nature of the eye. Eye lens is transparent and biconvex, made up of long columnar epithelial cells called as the lens fibers. These cells are accumulated with the proteins called crystalline. Next, the eyeball. The eyeball is spherical in nature. The anterior 1/6 of the eyeball is exposed and the remaining region is fitted well into the orbit. So we are seeing only the 1/6 of the eyeball. The wall of the eyeball consists of 3 layers and they are the fibrous sclera. So it is the fibrous sclera, vascular choroid and the sensory retina. So these are all given in the diagram. The outer core is composed of dense non-vascular tissue and it has two regions, the anterior cornea and the posterior sclera. Next one is the choroid. Choroid is a highly vascularized pigment layer that nourishes all the eye layers and its pigments absorbs the light to prevent internal reflection. Then comes the retina. So the retina forms the innermost layer of the eye and it consists of two regions, a sheet of pigmented epithelium or the non-visual part and the neural visual regions. The neural retina layer contains of three types of cells. They are the photoreceptor cells called as the cones, rods and the bipolar cells and the ganglion cells. So the mechanism of the vision. So when light enters the eyes, it gets refracted by the cornea, aqueous humor and lens and it is focused on the retina and excites the rod and cone cells. The photopigment consists of opsin, the protein part, and the retinal end derivative of the vitamin A. Light induces dissociation of the retinal from opsin and causes the structural changes in opsin. This generates an action potential in the photoreceptor cells and is transmitted by the optic nerves to the visual cortex of the brain through bipolar cells, ganglia and optic nerves for the perception of the vision. So the rods and cone cells, the rod cells are responsible for vision in the dim light, whereas the cone cells are responsible for color vision and it works best in the bright light. So there are some refractive errors of eye that may happen in our eye. So they are the myopia, hypermetropia, presbyopia, astigmatism and the cataract. So myopia is also known as nearsightedness. It can be corrected by the concave lens. Next one is the hypermetropia. It is also called as the long-sightedness. This defect can be overcome by using convex lens that converts the entering light rays on the retina. So next one is the presbyopia. Due to aging, the lens loses elasticity and the power of accommodation. Convex lenses are used to correct this defect. Astigmatism is due to the rough, irregular curvature of cornea and lens. Cylindrical gases are used to correct this error. So cataracts is due to the changes in nature of protein and the lens become opaque. It can be corrected by surgical procedures. So that's all about the photoreceptors. Now we will see about the phonoreceptors. So the ear is the site of a reception of two senses, namely hearing and the equilibrium. Anatomically, the ear is divided into three regions: the external ear, the middle ear and the internal ear. The external ear consists of pinna, external auditory meatus and the eardrum. The pinna is a flap of elastic cartilage covered by skin. It collects the sound waves. The external auditory meatus is a curved tube that extends up to the tympanic membrane, or also called as the eardrum. The tympanic membrane is composed of connective tissue covered with skin outside and with mucous membrane inside. So the phonoreceptor. Next we will see about the middle ear. So the middle ear is a small air-filled cavity in the temporal bone. You can see in the diagram the three ears: the external ear, the middle ear and the internal ear. So the middle ear is separated from the external ear by the tympanic membrane or the eardrum, and from the internal ear by a thin bony partition. The bony partition contains two small membrane covered openings called the oval window and the round window. The middle ear contains three ossicles, ear ossicles called as the malleus, incus and stapes, and it is also called as hammer bone, anvil bone and stirrup bone, which are attached to one another. The malleus is attached to the tympanic membrane and is head articulates with the incus, which is the intermediate bone lying between the malleus and the stapes. The stapes is attached to the oval window in the inner ear. The ear ossicles transmit sound waves to the inner ear, and a tube called eustachian tube connects the middle ear with the cavity of the pharynx. This tube helps in equalizing the pressure of air on either sides of the eardrum. The inner ear is the fluid-filled cavity consisting of two parts: the bony labyrinth. The bony labyrinth consists of three areas: cochlea, vestibula and semicircular canals. The cochlea is the coiled portion consisting of three chambers, namely scala vestibuli, scala tympani. These two are filled with perilymph, and the scala media is filled with endolimb. At the base of the cochlea, the scala vestibula ends at the oval window, whereas the scala tympani ends at the round window of the middle ear. Next, we will see about the organ of corti. The organ of corti is the sensory ridge located at the top of the basilar membrane, and it contains numerous hair cells that are arranged in 4 rows along the length of the basilar membrane. Next, we will see about the mechanism of the hearing. Sound waves entering the external auditory meatus falls on the tympanic membrane. This causes the eardrum to vibrate, and these vibrations are transmitted to the oval window through the 3 auditory ossicles. Since the tympanic membrane is 17 to 20 times larger than that of the oval window, the pressure exerted on the oval window is about 20 times more than that of the tympanic membrane. This increased pressure generates pressure waves in the fluid of perilimb. This pressure causes the round window to alternately bulge outward and inward. Meanwhile, the basilar membrane along with the organ of corti move up and down. So, what are the defects of the ear? The blockage of ear canal with the ear wax, rupture of the eardrum, middle ear infection with fluid accumulation, and the restriction of the oscular movement. Next is the organ of the equilibrium. So, our ear is the organ of the equilibrium. So, balance is part of the sense. It is called as the proprioception. It is the ability to sense the position and orientation and movements of the body. The organ of balance is at the vestibular system, which is located in the inner ear next to the cochlea. The vestibular system is composed of a series of fluid filled sacs and tubules. These sacs and tubules contain endolimb and are kept in the surrounding perilimb. These two fluids, perilimb and endolimb, respond to the mechanical forces during changes occurring in body position and the acceleration. So next we will see about the olfactory receptors. The receptors of taste and smell are the chemoreceptors. About the olfactory receptors. The receptors for taste and smell are the olfactory receptors or the chemoreceptors. The smell receptors are existed by airborne chemicals that dissolve in fluids. The yellow colored patches of olfactory epithelium form the olfactory organs that are located on the roof of the nasal cavity. The olfactory epithelium is covered by a thin coat of mucus layer. The yellow colored patches of olfactory epithelium form the olfactory organs that are located on the roof of the nasal cavity. The olfactory epithelium is covered by a thin coat of mucus layer below and olfactory glands bounded connective tissues above. It contains 3 types of cells: supporting cell, basal cell, and millions of pin-shaped olfactory receptor cells. The olfactory glands and the supporting cells secrete the mucus. The unmyelinated axons of the olfactory receptor cells are gathered to form the filaments of olfactory nerve, which synapse with cells of olfactory bulb. The gustatory receptor. The sense of taste is considered to be the most pleasurable of all senses. The tongue is provided with many small projections called papillae, which give the tongue an abrasive feel. The taste buds are located mainly on the papillae, which are scattered over the entire tongue surface. Most taste buds are seen on the tongue, few are scattered on the soft palate, inner surface of the cheeks, pharynx, and epiglottis of the larynx. The taste buds are flask shaped and consists of 50 to 100 epithelial cells of 2 major types. Gustatory epithelial cells called the taste cells and the basal epithelial cells called as the repairing cells The long microvilli called the gustatory hairs project from the tip of the gustatory cells and extends through a taste pore to the surface of epithelium where they are bathed by the saliva. Gustatory hairs are the sensitive portion of the gustatory cells and they have sensory dendrites which send the signal to the brain. The basal cells that acts as a stem cells divide and differentiate into new gustatory cells. Skin sense of touch. Skin is the sensory organ of touch and is the largest sense organ. This sensation comes from billions of microscopic sensory receptors located all over the skin and associated with the general sensations of contact, pressure, heat, cold, and pain. Some parts of the body, such as the fingertips, have a large number of these receptors, making them more sensitive. Some of the sensory receptors present in the skin are tactile Merkel disc is light touch receptor lying in the deeper layer of the epidermis. Hair follicle receptors are light touch receptors lying around the hair follicles. Meissner corpuscles are small light pressure receptors found just beneath the epidermis in the dermal papillae. They are numerous in hairless skin areas such as fingertips and the soles of the feet. Hessinian corpuscles are the large egg-shaped receptors found scattered deep in the dermis and monitoring vibration due to pressure. It allows to detect different textures, temperature, hardness, and pain. Ruffini endings, which lies in the dermis, responds to continuous pressure. Krauss end bulbs are the thermoreceptors that sense the temperature. So, have you heard of melanocytes? Melanocytes are responsible for producing the skin pigment melanin, which gives skin its color and protects it from the sun's UV rays. Vertigo leukoderma is a condition in which the melanin pigment is lost from areas of the skin, causing white patches, often with no clear cause. Vitiligo is not contagious. It can affect people of any age, gender, or ethnic group. The patches appear where melanocytes fails to synthesize the melanin pigment. So, here is a case study. A person on his way to village in a car for a weekend holidays after finishing the office work. As he is very tired, he begins to feel drowsy. He turns up the car stereo volume, opens the car window, and has sips of ice cold water. How these actions keep him awake? So he is very tired, he is driving the car, he is drowsy, he may fall asleep and he can meet an accident. But how he prevented himself? By turning up the stereo volume, opens the car window and sips the ice cold water. What these things do? The increase in the number of sensory stimuli he receives is related to the cerebral cortex, which gets activated, and it has been prevented from sleeping. So it all has been connected with our brain. So with this the lesson gets over. So the questions on the display, you have to do it as your assignment. So the exams are nearing. Kindly go through the lessons, try to bygoat it, keep it in your memory, study well. All the best. Assalamu alaikum. So this is Mohiddin Ahmad Sharif signing off.